Masechet Gittin Daf Nun Bet. We continue with the next Mishnah of something that is for the betterment of society. Yetomim shesamchu etzel Baal Habayit, o shemina lehen avihen apotropos, chayav le'aser perotehem. And we have orphans who are being taken care of by a Baal Habayit, a homeowner. Maybe some kind of like a foster a home or something like that. So someone took in these orphans, and so therefore that homeowner is going to be responsible for their financial well-being. Or if the father, before he died, appointed a steward, apotropos, said you are in charge of all of their finances. In both of these cases, the Baal Habayit or the apotropos is obligated to take maaser on their produce. So these orphans, they own land and it's producing fruit. And so before the children can eat it, they have to take terumah, maaser, and so on. And since they don't know how to do it themselves, so the apotropos does it on their behalf. Furthermore, apotropos sheminahu avi yetomim yishaba, minuhu betin lo yishaba. Abba Shaul omer chiluf hadebarim. A apotropos that was appointed by the father before he died, he must swear that at the end, once the children grow up, and now he's done with his stewardship, he has to swear that he never took anything personally. Apotropos generally is not paid, and so he's doing this as a favor, but he's not allowed to take money, appropriate money, do anything wrong to the orphan, so he has to make a vow. However, if the Bet Din is the one that appointed this apotropos, then he does not have to make a vow. The Gemara will explain why. Abba Shaul says it's the other way around. If the father appoints him, then he does not have to make a vow. If the Bet Din appoints him, then he does have to make a vow. All right, now we're going to deal with the beginning of the Mishnah. Urminhu atem velo shutafin, atem velo arisin, atem velo apotropin, velo hatorem et she'eno shelo. The Mishnah ruled that apotropos has to take maaser on behalf of the orphans. However, we have a baraita that teaches not so. Atem says you have to take terumah maaser, but not partners, meaning two partners that share ownership. One partner is not allowed to take maaser on behalf of the other without the other's permission. Or aris, a sharecropper who is working the land on behalf of the owner, cannot take maaser on behalf of the owner without his permission. You and not apotroposin, and not someone who's taking terumah on something that does not belong to him. So, with the question that while the Mishnah says apotropos has to take maaser, this baraita says the opposite. The apotropos is not authorized, cannot take maaser. Someone has to take maaser for himself. Apotropos cannot take it on behalf of the orphans. Amar Rav Chisda la kashya kan la'achil kan la'aniach. Rav Chisda says there's no contradiction between these two sources. The Mishnah was talking about where he's taking maaser on behalf of the orphans so that they can eat. In other words, for current food that they right now need. And the minor orphans, they don't know how to take maaser, but they need to eat, and they need to eat kosher food. So therefore, the apotropos is doing it, in fact, on their behalf. That's fine. But if it's to put aside, in other words, to put into storage for next year or for later on, then that's not allowed. The apotropos cannot do that. Rather, you put it aside and you wait. Till either it needs to be eaten and then it takes maaser, or it'll be sold, or that they will grow up and then they will take maaser on their own. So apotropos can only attend to the immediate needs and take maaser for them to eat right now. And in fact, we have a baraita that confirms this answer that we just said. The apotropos can take to the maaser in order for them to eat now, but not to leave it for storage. Now that we quoted the beginning of this baraita, which is also found in Tosefta Terumot, we're going to continue and quote the entire thing. It's quite a long baraita. So the apotropos also can sell on behalf of the minors their animals and slaves and maidservants and houses and fields and vineyards, but only if they need to eat right now, but not for future investment, right? If there's no food in the house and they need money, there's no cash, they need something liquid. So yes, they can sell any of these items, land or movable items and animals, in order to get money to feed them, but not to leave on the side for storage or for future investment. Mochrin lahen perot, yenot, shmanim, satot. And similarly, the apotropos can sell fruit and wine, oil, fine flour for them to eat. In other words, they have an orange grove. They only eat so many oranges. They're going to sell their oranges so that they can buy all kinds of food that the orphans need. That's permitted, but not to put aside that money for a later date for something in the future. And also the apotropos can acquire for them lulav and arava, sukkah, sisit, and anything that has a fixed amount, including a shofar. Even though shofar, you could go to the Bet Knesset and hear it, but sometimes there's not always a Bet Knesset around, so they can have a shofar so that they can fulfill that mitzvah. And so too, to have a Sefer Torah or tefillin, mezuzot. Even though they're minors, a minor boy starts wearing tefillin customarily even before his bar mitzvah. So they need that. Mezuzot, they need all these things that have a fixed amount, including a Megillah. Right? It's appropriate for them to have a Megillah so that they can have it. They can read from it. Someone else can read on behalf of them. Let's say someone who knows how to read, but now they can use this Megillah to help these orphans fulfill their mitzvah. So even though they're minors, still, they should have all these items if they need these items in order to fulfill all these mitzvot, because these are fixed amounts. However, the apotropos is not authorized to give tzedakah on behalf of the orphans from the orphans' money, and not to take their money and use it to redeem captives, and not anything else that has no limit. Right? There's always poor people. There's always people that need to be redeemed, and so since it's not a fixed amount, we can't allow the apotropos to do that. Also, tanchumei avelim, when you go and visit a mourner, nowadays we just go and visit, but in those days you would visit and bring something. You'd bring food. Everybody would bring a dish or something that the mourners need. But this is also something that has no fixed amount, right? There's you don't know how many people are going to be in mourning and how many times you're going to have to do this, and so the apotropos cannot take that money for them. And also the Braita says apotropos cannot go to court and join in litigation, not in a way that will be to the detriment of the orphans and not for the benefit of the orphans. In other words, if the orphans are sued or something, right, or some kind of claim against them, for them, apotropos is not permitted to go. Now, we ask, Lizkot amai lo, well, why not if it's for their benefit, right? I understand if it's going to be for their loss. So the halacha is that if an apotropos goes to court on behalf of orphans and loses, then the orphans can grow up and say, hey, we never agreed to that, and we actually relitigate. So that the original Bet Din court verdict will not be valid. So we understand if it's a loss, they say apotropos, you can't do something that would cause a loss to the orphans. But for their gain, why not? Rather, you're right, if the apotropos would go to court, it was easy, open shut case, and they just to pick up a check from that waiting for them there, then that's fine if it's purely for the benefit of the orphans. But if it's going to cause a loss, even though eventually it may lead to a gain, then that's not allowed. We're going to see in the following list that the apotropos can make some investments, but he has to be very, very conservative in these investments, no risk at all. And so sometimes you have to put money into a lawsuit, and then hopefully you'll probably get it back if it's a good case. But the apotropos cannot do that. Cannot put himself, cannot put the estate under any financial obligation, even if it's for gain in the future. ואין אפוטרופין רשאים למכור ברחוק ולגאול בקרוב, ברעה ולגאול ביפה. מה טעמה? דדילמה משתדפין. Apotropos cannot sell land that the orphans have that's far away and use that money to redeem land that's close. Now, most people would say that's a good deal, right? If you have fields that are scattered all around and you can sell a faraway one, and then there's a close by field that, let's say, the father had sold, but now you have a chance to redeem it and bring it, so it's better to have fields closer together. Or if there was to sell a bad field and instead use the same money to redeem a good field that the father had sold, and now you have a chance to redeem it. Now, even though these things seem to be for the benefit of apotropos, these seem like good business deals that anybody would want to do, still not allowed. Why? The dilma mishtadefin, because maybe the new ones that they bought will become blighted, right? And there's always a chance that this field that you're buying that's close by or that's good now actually will turn out having some problem and will be actually worse, and therefore it'll turn out that Apotropos did something bad for them. So even though it looks on paper like it would be good, but if there's a chance it will be bad, he should not do anything risky. And he should not sell land to buy slaves. Generally, land is more permanent, more stable. Slaves, they get hurt, they die, who knows, they run away. But the other way around is better, to sell a slave and buy with it field that's a more stable asset, so that's permitted. According to Tanakama, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Af lo limkor avadim v'likach sadot. Mai tama dilma la meshapeyan. Rabban Rashbak says, no, don't even sell slaves to buy fields. And then the Gemara adds in, right, this my tama over here and over here are not part of the Braita. You see the Braita is all in Hebrew. Then the Gemara adds in some comments and questions in Aramaic. So what's the reason? Again, because land is not always secure. When you buy land, it could always be that someone else has a lien on it. They're going to come collect it after, and you're going to turn out that you're going to cause a loss, and you're going to have to go to court and sue the seller and get the money, try to get the money. And so if you already have the slaves and they're there from before, just leave it as is. Even exchanging it for land is too risky. The Braita continues, Apotropos did not have the authority to free a slave because it doesn't really belong to the apotropos. It belongs to the orphans, and the orphans are minors. And so he can't really free a slave himself. However, he can sell a slave, and we saw above that there are circumstances where he can sell a slave. For example, if you need that money to get food or to get land investment, according to Tanakama. So if you need to free a slave, you can sell the slave to someone else, and then the apotropos takes the money, and that person can sell. That person can free the slave. However, Rabbi Omer ani afu noten demei asmo v'yoseh mipnei shehu kemochro lo. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, I disagree. You don't need to sell it to someone else. He can even, the owner, the apotropos, can sell the slave to himself. In other words, allow the slave to pay money on his own behalf. And that's okay, because apotropos, although he's not the owner, so he doesn't have the right to free a slave in the normal way of freeing a slave, like giving a get shichrur, but he has a right to sell the slave, and you don't have to sell the slave to a third person. You can sell the slave to himself. If the slave doesn't have money, so then he can write a loan document that says, I'll pay you for my value later, but he can get his freedom. And Braita ends and says that the apotropos has to make a calculation at the end. Once they reach adulthood, then he has to make a big spreadsheet of all the income, all the assets that were there when he started, and all the assets that are there at the end, and show what was the gain, what was the loss, and everything that he did, in order to justify his actions that he did not take anything. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer eno sarich. Rashbag says no, he does not have to. Eno sin apotropin nashim va'abadim uktanim ve'im minan abi yatomim hareshut beyado. We do not appoint apotropos. The apotropos that one appoints, that a bet din appoints, cannot be a woman, a slave, or a child. However, if the father is appointing it, then he can do whatever he wants, and he can appoint any of these categories to take care of his own estate on behalf of the orphans. All right, that's the end of the Baraita. Now we have a series of stories about different apotroposim who made certain actions on behalf of orphans. Was it allowed? Was it not allowed? Hahu apotropos tava b'shibutei Rabbi Meir. Tava kamezeben arata v'zeben abde. V'la shabke Rabbi Meir. Apotropos in Rabbi Meir's neighborhood. He was selling land and buying slaves. Rabbi Meir says that goes against the halacha. Right? We just read it in the Baraita. So he stopped them from doing that. Achavu le bechalmeh ani laharos v'ata libnot. Afilu hachi la ashkach amar dibre chalamot lo ma'alin ve'lo moridin. Rabbi Meir was showed in a dream the words, I want to destroy and you are building. In other words, the idea of the dream is that God wants to destroy the estate of these orphans. Why? I don't know. Maybe it was gotten illegally. Maybe, I don't know, something wrong. I don't know, whatever reason. This is what he saw in a dream. So, in other words, the point of the dream was to tell Rabbi Meir to allow the apotropos to make these bad decisions, sell land and buy slaves. Then don't get involved. Rabbi Meir woke up, and nevertheless, he did not pay attention to the dream. Even though some dreams are a 60th of prophecy, and so can have important messages, but Rabbi Meir said, I'm not listening to that dream, because he said, dreams do not bring up and do not bring down. They are not important, right? Sometimes dreams are just leftovers of subconscious garbage and just nonsense. And therefore, you don't have to listen to a dream. So that's a really nice and important statement by Rabbi Meir. He's going to uphold the benefit of the best interest of the orphans, whether or not there's some dream that who knows if it has any accuracy, any legitimacy. So he went ahead and just followed the halacha straight. Hanhu be'tere tigare behu satan dechol beshimsheh havuka minsu behadeh hadadeh. There were these two people that would argue with each other every Friday afternoon around sunset. And this was instigated by the Satan. Friday afternoon around sunset, you could imagine, there's always high tension, getting ready for Shabbat, last minute things to do. And, who knows, maybe they were in business together and they were arguing, or neighbors, and they always had something to argue about on Friday afternoon. So this was an ongoing, repetitive fight. Ikla be Rabbi Meir latam ikebinu telata beshimsha davad lehu shelama shameh dekamar vai dapeke Rabbi Meir lahu gabra mi bete. So Rabbi Meir got involved. He heard that there's people that are arguing. So Rabbi Meir wants to make shalom. So this is another. This has nothing to do with orphans, but it's related to the previous because it's another. Again, shows the greatness of Rabbi Meir. And so he stopped them from fighting for three Friday afternoons each week in a row. He would go and get involved and be there at that time to make sure that they wouldn't fight and pacify them. And so he did this for 3 weeks in a row. And then after 3 weeks, they stopped fighting. Right? Have a chazakah. That now they're friends. He heard the Satan say, "Woe is to me that Rabbi Meir removed me from this house." Right. So Satan is always invited when people are fighting and there's discord. Right. That brings the Satan in. So you want to get rid of Satan and make peace. And so Rabbi Meir was successful in making peace among these two people. Hahu apotropos dava b'shibutei Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi dava kamezeben ar avezaben toreh vela amar le vela midi. In the contrasting story, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, a first generation Amorah, saw someone in his neighborhood who was selling land and buying ox, which seems like it's against the halacha, right? He should have done something, but Rabbi Yoshe ben Levi did not intervene. Sabala ke Rabbi Yosef Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amai lo kariti lishti ishti ulshori shori, ela lishti beti ulshori sadi. He's following the opinion of Rabbi Yosef the Tana, who says that I never in my life called my wife, and my ox. Rather, I call my ox my house, because she is the essence of the home, and I called my ox my field, because a field without an ox is nothing, right? You need the field to plow it. That's the tractor. That's what makes the field produce and makes it valuable in the first place. So selling land to buy an ox can be a very good idea if you need more oxen to plow the other land that you have and make it produce more. All right. So really, land and oxen are interchangeable. Whatever you need to make the best produce, then that's good. So that's why Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, he followed that financial advice and did not intervene with that apotropos. Hanhu yatmeh davu semichi gabe hahi sabta v'hava lehu torta shakla v'zabene ni halayhu. So now you have orphans. They're living with an older woman. So that means, we saw in the beginning in the Mishnah that someone can live with a Baal Habayit. Maybe the father appointed and said, hey, so told this woman, would you take care of my orphans after I'm gone? Now she's in charge of the orphans' finances. The orphans had an ox. She took the ox and sold it on their behalf. So there was other relatives of the orphans who, interestingly, didn't take them in, by the way, but I don't know, some cousins or something, and they said, oh, why is she selling the orphan's ox? Right? Who authorized her to do so? She shouldn't do that. So Rav Nachman said, no, we learned in the Mishnah, orphans that are living with a Baal Habayit, so that's fine. If this person was appointed, then she has authority to sell the ox. It could be for food or whatever is a good reason. But then the relatives continue and they say no. Veha ayakar, but the animal increased in value afterwards. So you see that she made a bad financial decision. She should have kept the ox and would have benefited from the increase in value. Rav Nachman says birshuta delokech ayakar. Rav Nachman says no, but an increase in value once it was in the buyer's possession, so that has nothing to do. Once you make a sale, that's it. You make a sale, right? You should never look at your stock after you sell it, because then what if it goes up? Then you're just going to feel bad about it. So no, she sold it at the market price, and she, for whatever reason, maybe they needed food. The increase happens afterwards. That now the buyer gets that increase, but it has nothing to do with what she did. But they did not yet receive the money. So the orphans come and say, hold on, they was not yet paid for. The woman just transferred the ox to these buyers. So now the buyers are in physical possession of the ox, but they didn't pay for it yet. Amar lehu imken haynu derav Hanilai bar Idi amar Shemuel. Tamar Rab Hanilai bar Idi amar Shemuel nichsei yotomim aren kehekdesh vela mikne ela bechaspa. So if that's the case, he tells the relatives, then you have a good point, because now that would fall under the statement of Rab Hanilai bar Idi in the name of Shemuel, who said that the property of orphans is like hekdesh and is not acquired except by transfer of money. Okay, so some background to this. In general, if you have regular people who are making a transaction, the giving of the money does not complete the transaction, but rather it's the pulling of the item. If it's an animal, you have to pull it, or if it's a movable item, to lift it up. You have to move the item in order to finish the transaction. And in fact, if you move the item and didn't give money, the transaction is already valid. So the money is a secondary part of it, and it's only the movement of it. If someone gives money and then changes their mind, either party can renege on the deal if money was transferred only. On the other hand, if the buyer pulls the item, then the sale is final and they cannot renege on the deal. That's the law for regular people. However, for Hekdesh, it's different. for Hekdesh, say something is Hekdesh, and I'm going to buy something from the temple treasury and redeem it thereby, and I give, and I pull it. So just because I pulled it does not make the sale go through, right? La mikne ela bechaspa. I actually have to pay for it. So therefore, if I pulled on it, and then the price went up, the temple treasurer can say, "Oh, forget it. You didn't pay yet. So the sale is not final. We're canceling it, and we're going to take it back." And therefore, in this case, although the woman sold it, and the buyers took possession of the animal, pulled the animal, and in the normal case that would be then that sale would be final. But here's what Shemuel's chidush is: we're going to treat Yetomim as if it were Hekdesh. Just like for Hekdesh, we protect the interest of the temple treasury, so too for orphans we protect their interest, and if it's in their interest to renege on the deal, since it wasn't paid for yet, then they can renege on the deal, and she can get her ox back, and which is now more valuable, and that is permitted. Okay, so this is going to be an important lesson. We're going to see some more examples of it. Hamre de Rabbana ukba yatma mishachu arba'a vayikar kam b'shita shita atu legabe Rav Nachman amar lehu haynu Rav Chanilai bar Idi amar Rav Chanilai bar Idi amar Shemuel nechse yotumim arem ke'ekdesh vela mikne ela bechaspa. So someone came to buy wine from Rabbana Ukba, the orphan, and the buyer pulled it, and they agreed on a price of 44 dinar per barrel. However, they didn't pay for it yet, the buyer. And so, in the meantime, it increased to 66 dinar per barrel. They came to Rav Nachman and told him the same thing. This is what Shemuel's law applies to, that for orphans' money, we protect it the same as we protect Hekdesh property, and therefore, if you didn't pay for it yet, then the sellers, the Yatomim, the Potropos, have a right to renege on the deal and take the wine back. And then if you still want it, then you're going to have to pay the higher amount, the 66. Good. Mishuch pere meyatmeh. Aikur haynu de Rav Chaninai bar Idi zul lo yeh koach hejot hamur mehekdesh. We're now going to learn that this law that protects the orphans works the other way. It works both ways. We're going to protect them whether the price goes up or the price goes down. So as follows: if someone pulls produce that belongs to orphans, and then after he takes possession of it, he does an action on it. Normally that would be the final sale, but for orphans not so. If the price goes up, so then that's what we just said, Rav Chanilai bar Idi, that if you didn't pay for it yet, the sale is not final, and they can take the fruit back. Now, on the other hand, Zol, let's say the price goes down, and now the buyer might say, "Oh, now the price is less. I want to pay less." We do not allow that. The power of a regular person should not be greater than that of Hekdesh. For Hekdesh here, we're saying Hekdesh meaning the same as the interests of the Hekdesh, it would be the same as the interests of the orphans. And therefore, just like in a regular sale, once you take possession and pull the fruit, that's it. You can't renege on the deal. So all the more so, we're not going to treat orphans or Hekdesh less than a regular person, and therefore, since you pulled on it, you have to pay the original price, even though it got cheaper. So therefore, the orphans are protected either way, whether it goes up or it goes down. They get the benefit of deciding they can renege on the deal. Whether it was just when it was just pulled and it was not paid for, or if it was paid for and not pulled, they can do either way. Okay. Imshichu lehu pere liyatmeh. If an apotropos pulled some fruit on behalf of the orphans, ayakar. In the meantime, the price of the fruit went up. So that's good for the orphans. So then we'll apply the rule that a regular person shouldn't be given more power than hekdesh or orphans, and for a regular person, pulling completes the deal, and therefore for an orphan, pulling he has the right to say completes the deal, and he's keeping the fruit. Now, even though they went up, and he keeps the fruit, and he can pay later the original lower price. Zul savur mina hainu d'Rabbi Chanilai bar idi. But if the apotropos takes possession of fruit and then it gets cheaper, so now the orphans will want to get out of the deal, and they can get out of the deal because we're going to apply Rav Chanilai that say orphans are the same as hekdesh, in which only paying money completes the deal, and just pulling on it does not complete the deal. So the orphans can renege and said, oh, now it's cheaper. We can go find the same fruit for a cheaper price now somewhere else. And so they get the benefit both ways. However, that's what they thought to say, savur mina. However, the students, Amar lehu Rav Shisha bered Rav Idi hara'ahi liditu. Rav Shisha says, actually, you think you're benefiting the orphans by doing this? Actually, it's going to be negative for the orphans. Because there won't be any credit for them. There'll be times when the orphans will need fruit, and no one will want to give them the fruit now for payment later, because they know, if the orphans will retain the right to renege on the deal if the market goes down, and so no one's going to give them fruit up front. They're going to have, and maybe they don't have cash right now. And so it's actually going to end up, you can benefit from it once, but once, if this is the rule going forward, then it's actually going to be work against the orphans. And so, don't apply that rule here. We're going to go through every possible scenario. If the orphans give money, they pay money for fruit, right? So they paid for the fruit, but didn't pull on it yet. They just paid for fruit at the current price. Zol, and now the price goes down, so they're going to want to renege on the deal. Lo yeheh koach hejot hamor min hekdesh. So they should be allowed to renege on the deal, because even a regular person can renege on the deal, and so their hekdesh or orphans should not have less rights than a regular person. Ayakar sebur mina hainu d'Rav Chanila bar idi. If the price goes up, well, then that's good for the orphans, because they already gave money, they paid money at the original lower price. And so the students thought to say, we should apply here the rule of Rav Chanilai, that orphans are the same as hekdesh, and paying money completes the deal, and therefore the seller cannot renege. However, Amar lehu Rav Shisha bered Rav Idi hara'al diditu datu lememad lehu nisrefu chitechem ba'aliyah. You think it's going to be good? It's actually going to be to the detriment of the orphans, because in the future the sellers will be able to say to the orphans, oh, yeah, you paid money and I was holding on to your produce. Oh, sorry, your produce was burnt in the storehouse. And they won't bother to even save it, because for orphans like hekdesh, the money is the final closing of the deal, right? And so they got their money, and so they'll say, okay, so the deal is finished, and they won't bother to save the produce, and won't be responsible for the produce that burned. So it ends up being worse for them, right? It's better to have the regular system for everyone, where actually taking possession of the produce, that's what completes the deal, and that way the seller is responsible for the protection of the produce and for its delivery. Now, if some buyers give money to the orphans for produce, but the orphans are still holding on to the produce, the buyers didn't acquire it, didn't pull it yet, and in the meantime, the value of the produce goes up. So this is good for the orphans. Now that's more valuable, and they will want to renege on the deal. They'll say, here, take your money back. We have this produce that's more valuable, and so we can get a better price elsewhere. So they should be able to do that, just like for hekdesh. So just like a regular person can renege on the deal if only money was given until it's pulled, so too, hekdesh or orphans should be able to do the same and renege on the deal since the produce was not pulled yet. On the other hand, zul, if the price went down, so now the orphans want to keep that money because they got a good price beforehand, and they want the deal to go through. But the buyers will want to renege. So so they said, well, maybe this is the application of what Rav Chanilai said. The students thought to apply it, and they say therefore the sale is final, because just like for hekdesh, money makes the sale final, so too for orphans. Orphans can say, oh, we got the money, the sale is final, sorry, you cannot renege on the deal. However, Amar lehu Rav Shisha b'nei Rav Idi hara'ahu leditu tezimnin demistereche. It's going to end up being to the detriment of the orphans, because there's going to be times when the orphans need money. They need some cash, and the fruit is not ready yet, and so they want to get an advance payment, but nobody will give them an advance payment because everybody, the buyers all know, if we give them money, then that's it. The sale is going to be final, no matter what. Even if the price ends up going down, we still won't be able to renege on the deal. So we'd rather give the advance money to someone else. And no one will agree to make a deal with orphans until the orphans actually produce the fruit themselves, and so the orphans will lose out on the chance to get money in advance. So in all these things, Rav Shisha says, don't take a benefit from it. You think it's a benefit in the short term, but in the long term, it's actually good to follow the normal rules, like everybody else. Good. Amar Rav Asher, Ana ve'Rav Kahana chatminan ashetara de'ime de'ze'ira yatme dimzabenar לחרגה בלה אחרזתה. תמרין הרדעה לחרגה ולמזונה ולקבורה מזבנינן בלא אחרזתה. So Rav Asher said, I and Rav Kahana, we both signed on a document on behalf of the mother of Ze'ira, who was an orphan. And she is the mother, but she's also appointed as the apotropos. And she's selling some land or something on behalf of the orphan in order to pay the poll tax, which is really important. You have to pay the poll tax, otherwise you get in trouble. And that was okay, even though they did not announce it. Now, there's a general rule: when someone sells land or property of orphans, they have to make a public announcement 30 days before the sale goes through, in order to make sure that there will be a competitive bid. So they don't just do a fire sale and sell it to someone quickly. If you publicize it, then someone says, I have a higher price, and that will protect the interests of the orphans. Now, but these two rabbis signed on a document even though they didn't publicize it, because the sages Nahar De'ah said, for these three things, for payment of a head tax, for food, and for burial, if one of the orphans need to be buried, so then you need the cash and you need it right away, and therefore you can sell property even without an announcement, and that's why the Rav Asher and Rav Kahana were willing to go along with it. Next, Amram Sabba'a apotropa diatme hava. There was Amram, who was a dyer of clothing, and he was also appointed to be an apotropos for orphans. Some of the relatives of the orphan came to Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman appears in a lot of these cases. He was the Rosh Yeshiva in the city of Nehar De'ah, a third generation Amora. He was also married Yalta, married into the family of the exilarch, and so he was very important and wealthy. And he was also an expert in Dine Mamonot. So it's no coincidence that all of these cases are coming to his Beit Din. And so he's adjudicating these various cases. Okay, so they come and complained. Amri le ka lavish u'mechse miatmeh, and they say, this guy Amram, the dyer, he is clothing himself with the money of the orphans. He's taking the money of the estate and he's using it to buy fancy clothes. You think he's a dyer, so maybe he could dye his own fancy clothes. No, but the point is, he himself is not very rich, and he's buying all these very fancy clothes. and wearing them. Amar lehu ki hechid tame'an mileh. Rav Nachman defended Amram the dyer and said he's doing it so that his words will be heard. In other words, he has to go. Apparently, this is a significant estate, and Amram has to go and make deals on his behalf, and go buy and sell, and he has to look the part. He has to look properly dressed. So that people will take him seriously, and he'll be able to make better deals on behalf of the orphans, right? And this is true, at least it was until recently, that bankers and businessmen and people that are going to want to have to do a serious deal, they're going to wear their best. Some businesses will even give their employees a clothing budget, right? To say, yeah, listen, we need you to dress a certain way, and you have to look expensive, so that people will have more trust in you. And so although he is taking money for his clothing, but that's okay because he's doing it on behalf of the estate. Kachil v'shateh mididhu v'la amud. Then the relatives continue and complain, and they say, yeah, but he's also eating and drinking a lot. And he's taking it from must be taking it from the property. They don't know for sure, but they know that he has not. Amram the dyer is not assessed to be a wealthy man, and yet he's eating out at all these fancy restaurants. So he must be taking from the estate. So Rav Nachman says, how do you know? Maybe he found a valuable item, and he's using that. He sold it, and he's living off of that. V'haka mafsid. But then the relatives say he is doing things to the detriment of the property of the orphans. Amar lehu aituli sahadeh temafsid ve'istalekine. So Rav Nachman says, bring proof, right? Bring me witnesses that he's doing bad business deals, and then I will remove him. Amar Rav Huna chavrin mishmeh derav apotropos temafsid mesalekin le. Because Rav Huna, our colleague, said the name of Rav, that if a apotropos is doing a bad job and ruining the property, then we fire him. Titmar apotropos temafsid Rav Huna amar Rav mesalekin le tibera Rabbi Shela amre la mesalekin le v'hilchata mesalekin le. And then we bring the full statement that an apotropos who's doing a bad job damaging the property, Rav Huna, in the name of Rav, says we fire him. Although Rabbi Shela said we do not fire him, the halacha is that we do fire him. So yeah, just bring proof, and then we will take care of the situation. Okay, good. Next part of the Mishnah teaches apotropos sheminahu abi yetomim yeshabah. If the father appoints him, then he has to make a vow. And so the question is, but on the other hand, if a bet din appoints him, he does not have to make a vow. What's the reason? My ta'ama ilav de'it lehana amine la va'le apotropos mishum shivua la ate le'imnu. It must be that the father had done some good things, for many favors to this guy, who he's appointing as an apotropos, and therefore the apotropos kind of owes the father one, and that's why he agrees to be apotropos, even though he's not getting paid for it. So, since if not that there was benefit that the apotropos got from the father, that's why he's agreeing to it. So, if the father also says, if he knows also that you're going to have to make a vow at the end, the apotropos will still agree to be an apotropos, right? Because he's doing it because of the benefit that he got from the father, and he wants to do something good back for the father. And if that means that he also has to make a shivua at the end, he won't say no. He'll still do it. And so therefore, to protect the interests of the orphans, it's good for the apotropos to have to make a shivua. And here we can make him make a shivua. On the other hand, minu betin lo yishava milata be'almahu ta'aved lebedina v'iramet aleh shivua atel amnu'eh. On the other hand, if a betin appoints an apotropos, that's not because of any favor, any benefit that the apotropos gave. He's doing it just as a favor for the court. Right? The court is, I have respect for the court. They asked me to do this. I will do it for them. But if I'm going to have to make a vow at the end, most people don't want to make vows, even though they're honest people, but still, you just don't like to make a vow. and put yourself in that situation. And therefore, they will tell the court, thank you very much, but if I'm going to have to make a vow, I'm not going to do it. And so therefore, it's better for the Bet Din to be able to appoint good people to be apotropos and not require them to make a vow, because otherwise they won't agree to be apotropos and to begin with. So that's the Tanakama. Abba Shaul Omer Chilufa Devarim. Abba Shaul says the opposite. My Tama Minu Bet Din Yishaba. So he explains his reasoning. How come if a Bet Din appoints someone, he has to make a vow? He says that the apotropos appointed by the Bet Din actually does get benefit, because now there'll be a public voice, there'll be publicity that the Bet Din trusts him more than anybody else. It's kind of like when you had the 9/11 Commission to pay money to the victims from a certain fund, and they choose this guy. You're in charge of giving out the money to all the victims and the families and the firemen and so on. So that's a great honor. It shows that the government trusts this guy better than everybody else. And so even if he's doing it for free, he would still get benefit of that reputation. From then on, everybody will want to go to him as to be their lawyer, to be their administrator. So for that benefit, the court-appointed apotropos will be willing to make a shivua. On the other hand, we know abi yatomim lo yishava milata ba'al mahut aved hadadeh piramid ale shivuat elamnueh amar Rav Hanan bar Ameh amar Shmuel hedcheta ke'aba Shaul. On the other hand, if a father asks someone, so yeah, it could be a friend, and they did small things for each other, but nothing that's so significant. And so in that case, it's the friend that's doing a favor, a mere favor on behalf of the father. And then if he would know that he was going to have to make a shivua at the end, he was going to say, sorry, no thanks, right? You're my good friend, but I don't want to make a shivua. And so therefore, we cannot impose a shivua when a father appoints someone. And the halacha, according to Shemuel, is in fact like Abba Shaul. Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Zeh v'zeh yishaba v'halacha kidvarav. There's another braita, however, says both stewards, whether appointed by a father or a Bet Din, should make a vow, and in this statement, halacha is like that everyone has to make a vow. Taneh Rav Tachlifa bar Ma'arava kamed Rabbi Abu apotropos sheminau abi yatomim yishaba mipnei shehu noseh sachar amar le at aitet kaba v'chaylat le. So Rav Tachlifa from the west said before to be Abhu, he brought a braita that said apotropos whose father has appointed him does have to make a vow because he receives payment. And then we ask, Rabbi Abu asked, he really received payment? Did he bring a kav measurement and to measure exactly how much is going? Did you bring a kav measurement to see how much he earns from his efforts? Right? It's not literal. Apotropos does not actually get a benefit. Rather say it's as if he gets a benefit. It must be that this apotropos did receive benefit during the lifetime of the father, and so that was his reward, that was his payment, and now he's just gonna, after the father died, he's doing the work and doing it on behalf of all the benefit that he got beforehand, and therefore he should make a shivua. This is in accordance with the logic that we already opened with. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.